Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar, Disabled Parents Adoption Experiences, presented by the staff from the Lurie Institute on Disability Policy and the National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Nicole Lamerson, and I'm a research associate at the Lurie Institute, working on our disability and parenting projects and our projects about pregnancy and disability. I am also a physically disabled mom who uses a wheelchair. I have a 9-year-old and I have cerebral palsy. As a brief visual description, I am a Caucasian woman with brown hair pulled back. I have blue eyes, I'm wearing a tan sweater and a pair of peach colored headphones. Before we get started with today's presentation, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items related to Zoom and accessibility. Next slide, thank you. First, we have American Sign Language interpretation available. To view the interpreters, please click on the interpretation button that looks like a globe at the bottom of your screen. A small menu will appear and click American Sign Language. The ASL interpreters will appear in an independent window that you can move around your screen. And I want to say thank you to both of our interpreters who are here today. If you need interpretation and you're on your phone, the interpreter will be visible next to the presenter's videos. We also have closed captions available. To turn captions on, click the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. Additionally, for accessibility purposes and for our screen reader users, we have limited the chat. So if you use the chat, you can only reach the hosts, co-hosts, and panelists on this webinar. So please use the chat function for if you're having tech issues. And to give questions to our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And as I said, we have a Q&A function available for you to ask questions. We will save about 5 minutes at the end of this webinar to have our panelists answer questions, but feel free to put them in at any time. And finally, this Zoom is set up as a webinar, which means your cameras will not be on and only the presenters and the hosts will be seen. This webinar is being recorded and we will post it for you to view at a later time. We're going to try to answer all the questions at the end if there is time, but for the questions that we don't answer, we will provide answers in a resource document that we will share with you when we send the recording to everyone who is registered. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about us. The National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities is a cross-disability initiative guided by the ethos of the disability community, nothing about us without us. We provide training, research, and advocacy, and we provide information and support for parents with disabilities and their families. The center is part of the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy at Brandeis University, and we are supported by NIDLR, the National Institute for Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Next slide, please. Along those same lines, just a quick funding disclosure. While the contents of this presentation were developed under a grant from NIDLR, the views expressed today by our panelists, our moderator, are solely their own views and not necessarily a reflection of our funders' view. Next slide. All right, I'd like to take a minute and introduce our panelists and our moderator. And the discussion today is going to be a back and forth. So I'm really looking forward to an amazing chat. Robin Wilson-Beattie is a speaker, writer, and advocate for disability and sexuality. She combines years of personal experience with medically sound research to provide a unique perspective on disability, life, and identity, how disability, life, and identity impact one's sexual and reproductive health and expression. She was our 2024 Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellow at the Lurie Institute, and her speaking engagements have included multiple keynotes, panels, workshops, and webinars, including at the Executive Office of the Vice President. Robin is certified by the American Board of Sexology and the City College of San Francisco as a sexual health educator, and she is also a member of the Association of American Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Some of you may know this organization as ASECT. She's also a member of the Women of Color Sexual Health Network and a graduate and member of the San Francisco Sexuality Information and Training Institute. She is a co-founder of the SPM Disability Justice Fund. And when she's not discussing sex, she enjoys being a mom of two, renovating old houses, and heading off on her next adventure. Robin, we are so happy to have you here. Yomi Young is a solo parent to a thriving, spirited preschooler nicknamed Jelly Bean, whom she adopted in 2024. Mama and daughter live in Northern California, where they are supported by a wonderful village of family and friends. Yomi works in healthcare and is a disability justice organizer. Yomi, we're so happy to have you here. And then Dr. Kara Ayers, who is our moderator today. Dr. Ayers is an associate professor at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. She's co-founder of the Disabled Parenting Project and a co-investigator for the National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities and our National Center for Disability and Pregnancy Research. Kara is also a mom to three, adopted and not adopted. Thank you so much, Kara, for joining us today. And I am going to turn this over to you, Kara.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have. I'll provide a quick visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with a little bit longer than shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm wearing a brown sweater today. And so maybe we can go around and do our visual descriptions before we kick off our conversation. Robin?
Hi, I am Robin, and I am a brown woman, African American descent, wearing glasses, red lipstick, and I have purple hair, and I am wearing a kind of teal blue dress, and I have a cat that keeps popping up occasionally.
Yeah, Yomi?
My name is Yomi. I have a cold. Putting that out there. That's why my voice sounds this way. Happy to be here. I am a Black woman, brown skin. I'm wearing a horizontally striped top, glasses, and yeah, I think that's good for visual description. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I know this is a rich and deep topic, and so I'm excited to get started. And I think the place that makes the most sense is to get started with each of your stories. So could you tell us a bit about your story and why did you decide to build your family through adoption? So maybe Yomi, we can start with you this time.
Sure. I actually, well, my story with Jelly Bean began actually a few months before we met. I became licensed to be a resource parent, which is another way of saying a foster parent, through a local foster care agency in my town. And I initially was just doing respite. So respite is where you provide some care to a foster child while their current foster parents either are sick or on vacation or need a break. And so I was doing that initially, just kind of like short term. And then that was over the summer of 2022. And my first guest in my home was a teenage boy. And that was very interesting. He mostly stayed in his room, playing Call of Duty on his phone and sleeping. He wouldn't eat. He didn't want to go anywhere with me. We didn't have a lot of conflict, but he was just like, a teenager. He just didn't want to do things. And I spent several weeks with him, like trying to coax him to eat, bribe him to eat real food and not just hot Cheetos. And it was a really good experience with this kid. But I was exhausted with the teenage stuff after a few weeks. And so I let my foster care agency placement worker know I was going to take a break from teenagers and that I would agree to do emergency short-term placement for babies. So I got my room, got the bedroom ready for a baby. And I started immediately getting floods like every week, sometimes twice a week, calls and asking if I would accept placement of the baby. And what you should know, at least in California, even if you're on a track for adoption, kids are first placed with you as a foster child. All adoptions through the county and the state start in foster care. So, and when a child is placed with you and it's an emergency situation, oftentimes the placement social workers don't have a lot of information. But I had learned through just talking to other foster parents and just through my own training to ask like certain questions. And so the limited information that I was getting about the babies that needed temporary care were not aligned with what I felt that I could do. So I kept declining and saying no. And then one day I got a call. My sister said, look, the next time they call you, my sister wanted a baby. She didn't have grandchildren at the time. And she was like, look, we need a baby. So I don't care what they tell you, next time you need to get that baby. So I got a call on a warm August day. And it was about 3:00. And I was literally begged, because they will beg you, to please help them out taking placement of a 4-month-old baby who was being removed from her mommy, and it was an emergency situation. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And they said, if you do not take this baby today, she will go to a shelter. And so like they knew the thing to say to me, and I was like, and I was like, okay, that's all the information I had. My sister sent my brother-in-law to Target to go get all the baby things for a 4-month-old. And 4 hours later, a social worker pulled up to my house and handed me a 14-day-old infant, not a 4-month-old baby. So remember I said there's often like not really good information. And that was how I met Jelly Bean. She was spanking new, fresh out of the tummy oven. And just a little nugget, 6.5 pounds. And that's how our story began. And it was always everybody's intention, my understanding, that she would just be with me temporarily. And things changed, as they often do in foster care. And so we've been together since she was 14 days old, and I adopted her legally through the court system last January.
Wow, what an adventure. That's quite a shift from 4 months to 14 days. Hopefully Target had a good return policy on something.
Well, as you both know, especially when you're parenting, there is a big developmental difference between a 2-week-old baby and a 4-month baby.
Yeah.
So I was not prepared. So I had to hurry up and get prepared, like in the moment.
Yeah, especially I think as disabled parents, I know that like adjusting to carrying and lifting my 4-month-old was different than a 14-day-old. So in a lot of ways, though, I'm glad that you had those earlier kind of steps to figure it out. That would be helpful. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Robin, what about you? What was your story or stories?
Well, hi. I'm one of those people who knew they always wanted to be a mom from time I was little bitty. I always knew I wanted children. And when I was old enough to know about adoption and know, other kids who were adopted, I I was always interested in building a family through both biology and through adoption. So fast forward to becoming pregnant and giving birth to my oldest, who is now my 21-year-old kidult. It's like, and after that pregnancy, I knew that I was one and done when it came to pregnancy because it sucked, and I and I was just like, yeah, I can't. I went through a whole bunch of stuff, so my body was like, we don't want to do this again, and so much so that when I did get pregnant again in 4 years later, I opted to have an abortion. So then life happens. I get divorced from my first husband. I move across the country, um, and I get remarried. Um, but my husband and I, on our very first date, we discussed adoption and surrogacy because, like I said, I'm not doing pregnancy again. But I always wanted to be, I knew that that there was another child that I knew that there was another child that was going to be my family, that was out there, um, or I was hoping, praying, and so I started doing the work, and the end of 2020. I had told my husband, I was like, because it was like, okay, we need to move because we're going to get started on this adoption. We have to move out of this 1 bedroom apartment. We have to get a place that has more than 1 bedroom. And before you knew it, the following year we bought a house, and then we had to go through the classes. I went through an agency to become certified as a resource parent. I live in California, and as Yomi had already mentioned, that's what they call foster parents. And so I went through that process. But in 2020, I saw my son's. He had an ad. At the time, he was 12. He was 12 going on 13, and he had a video on on a site called Northwest Adoption Exchange, and there's all sorts of and he was in another state, from my state. But I just I was like, this is the child that I think would be family, that I think that they would want to be here, and I would want them here. So I went through that process of becoming certified as a resource parent, but then there was a whole other process because he's in another state. So you have to then get vetted by that other state and go through a lot of other things. But long story short, we finally got to meet my son in 2023. And I was making trips back and forth to the state that he was in. And for almost a year before he was his state allowed him to come to California in 2024. And he got adopted. We were able to officially adopt him in February of this year, when he was 16. So yeah, Xavier, by the time I got to meet him, he was 14. And but that I wouldn't have it any other way. And it it worked worked amazingly. He's our son. He's the brother. He's my kiddo. Um, and yeah, that is how that came to be.
It's wonderful. Yeah. A multiple year process for both of you that involved so many steps and a lot of uncertainty, it sounds like, along the way, too. So I wondered how your personal experiences, maybe your background or just knowledge of, and you mentioned this a little bit, Robin, with adoption and maybe disability as well. How did that shape your experiences? And also, what would you like people to know about adoption? Robin, can we start with you first this time?
Okay. The shape. Okay. So my personal experiences with adoption were, I knew about like kinship adoption because um, in my family of origin, if someone has a child and they are unable to rear that child, then another family member will adopt that child. And for a while, I thought that that was pretty much how it was almost everywhere. But I was like, oh, wait, no, that's just, because we're country, I'm from South. I, but, when I went to school and things like that, then I have friends who were adoptees. So, and I also was a very avid reader and read lots about, I'd read stories about adoption, but my personal experience with it, because I just, I, I've always, at first I could maybe kind of like imaginized, I guess, what it would be like having a kid, but I used to work daycare, I babysat, I love working with children. I I really enjoy children, but of course, in adopting, children grow up. They become teenagers. They become adults and stuff like that. So, and also, I adopted a little bit when I adopted my kid. I was a little older, and he was older too. But what I would want people to consider when thinking about adoption, I think, you need to think about how this is going to work out for a lifetime. Kind of, like I mentioned, you know, children grow up, and you also get older and change and things like that. So I I was thinking about, okay, what would this mean for a lifetime? Also, I also wanted to adopt a child with a disability because I am autistic, my husband is autistic, and my oldest child is autistic, and so is my youngest. He is also autistic. And when I saw this video, I was like, oh, yes, okay, it and that was very important for me because wanted um I wanted a child that also felt like they, belonged, but also had people that shared their experience as well. So uh that was really important to me, and I think that, especially as somebody with a disability, I think that that was what, I was looking at it also from that lens. Um, and also, if you look at the statistics of children in foster care with disability, a very high percentage. Um, and but I also knew that I knew that I did not want to adopt a baby. I wanted I felt like uh, for me, because it was, building a family, through adoption. I wanted the child to be also in proximity of age with my my older kids, so that they could form a bond and also, be a family. And I I I like, I don't know how to put it. I was like, and it all went according to plan, but but it did end up. They adore each other, and they're siblings. They do sibling things. They do go off together. They do their sibling things, and they genuinely love and enjoy each other. And so that was really important. But also, I found that going through the foster care system was actually pretty crucial to this process, because also needed that support there that was in place in order, for me to be like, am I going to have support to navigate and have assistance for like services and things that my child will need. For instance, I was talking about like disability and things in the foster care system. You also have to realize that adoption, all of this is rooted in trauma, and so I needed to make sure that we were going to always have access to therapy, to therapists, was it medical health care? Yeah. And support for education and things like that, which through, thankfully in California, the foster care system, adoptive system, that there was support, and there is support for that. So that also was really important to consider, because it's not just, okay, this person comes into your home, blah, blah, you go through this, and then boom, you get adopted, and then you live happily forever after. But no, it's still, it's a lifetime process. But also, another thing to consider is thinking about the connection with my youngest child's family of origin. I We have a transracial adoption. My youngest is of Chicano descent, and I am African American, and my husband is white. And that was something I wanted to make sure that, because I can't teach him about being, I can't teach him about his Mexican and Chicano heritage. I can't, I mean, I can expose him. I can give you like, but that family connection. And so, uh, being able to establish, links between some of his extended family of origin has actually been important in this process for us. That not that But that's not the case, of course, for every child. It just depends on their circumstances. But there's all of those things to consider. But particularly for me, what was important for me is I wanted, with adopting someone that was older, I wanted someone who wanted to be with a family, who wanted to have a family, who wanted to be part of a family like ours. And so it was important for me to find someone who had like the autonomy to, so to speak, to come out and say that this is what I want, or this is, what I don't want. My and especially my child has spent a majority of his time in like group homes and things like that, and so hadn't really had an experience of what it was like being you know in a home, in a family home. So that actually was also something that I think is something that would be that people need to consider, because we've both been learning along the way, you know, because, you know, your life experience is going to be different if you grew up in group homes versus if you grew up in a family home, and around like culture and things, you know, there are things that I just assumed that he would know how to do or know how to access. And because growing up in a group home or with supervision and alarms and all of these kinds of things, there were certain things like he just didn't know or know how to do. I think I'm trying to think, like an example of, for instance, he had never used a hair dryer, like a handheld hair dryer before, because they weren't allowed access to like electronics and things like that. And so I, and this was just a couple of months ago, because I was like, oh, well, here, just use a hair dryer. And then he was like, how do I, you know, he was having fun with it, and then he was like, this is the first time I've ever used one. And I'm like, what? Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, that's cool.
that's just some of my ideas.
Yeah, that's you're learning together, and I definitely resonate with things that you don't realize that they haven't experienced or experienced differently. My son was adopted in the middle of your two ages, so at 7, but also from a setting where he'd grown up in an institutional setting, and so you don't. I mean, we still come across things that we discuss as a family that you just take for granted that you experience when you grow up in a family, and so whichever our experiences are definitely shapes us. So Yomi, I wondered how did your experiences related to adoption shape your process? And also, what would you like for people to consider about adoption?
I'm not sure where we at on time, because maybe I'll just answer like the second part of
You can
that.
choose.
Okay.
It's totally up to you. Yeah.
I think some things to know is just to kind of reiterate what Robin said. Adoption is rooted in loss and complexity. And that loss and family separation, even for infants, that trauma and that loss, it lives in the body. And we don't know how or where that might show up. And I think that even if you have the biggest heart and the best intention, you need to know that your love, your nice home, all the toys, a loving family, none of that is going to cure or heal or erase the initial loss. And I've spoken to adoptive parents that I think live in just a la la land. Like, all we need is love. And that's not all you need. I think that you need a political analysis that racism and poverty are embedded in all aspects of adoption, that there is prevalent racist practice of pressuring expectant parents of color to relinquish their children. There is a practice of not providing poor and people and parents of color with support, of even offering lower placement fees for children of color as if they have lower value. And particularly in the case of transracial adoption, and I'm just going to call it out, mostly white folks, of pursuing some kind of colorblind love is enough approach. I think transracial adoption can work if parents are really serious about confronting their own racism and helping their children build a positive racial identity. And I think that that's the first thing that you need to be really clear and in touch with for yourself before you enter into this. You're not a savior. These children don't owe you thanks or gratitude. They aren't lucky that you chose them, or that I hate that. When people say to me, oh, Jelly Bean is so lucky that you adopted her. Like, she didn't choose this. She didn't choose any of the circumstances that led to her joining my family. And she doesn't owe me gratitude for being her mommy. I'm teaching her a gratitude practice around other things, but certainly not around love and care. she is deserving inherently of loving care and safety. It's also why, and I know it's different for everybody, the day I don't celebrate or honor the day she was legally adopted. It's not our gotcha day. I didn't snatch her from somebody. I didn't take her away. I didn't steal her. I didn't find her in a cabbage patch or something. The day that we celebrate is the day that we met, and that's our family day. Because for me, the legal adoption day was merely the state recognizing what was already true, which is that we were a family. So I think the main thing is to like get really clear on your politics and your motivations and what are your ethics, what are your boundaries, because I try to practice abolition. I actually think the child welfare system should be abolished. I think it's terrible and violent and incredibly racist and harmful. And yet I am complicit in it because I became a resource parent. But while I was a resource parent, I really tried to practice a lot of my values of justice and liberation. So there were things that were common or expected that I just didn't do because I was living my values, and we don't have to get into all of that. And also the way I even challenged the process of becoming licensed and certified, I was met with incredible ableism. And I had to become uppity crib. I had to really check people about bias and assumptions, and frankly, the way they were talking to me. Because who are you talking to? I'm a 50-year-old woman. And I'm disabled and I'm capable, and I am fully capable of taking care of a child. I mean, the agency initially told me they would not place a child under 5 with me because they didn't think I could chase after them at a park. So it's just stuff like that. You have to be really rooted and clear in who you are and what your values are, because I will tell you, and this happened for me, and I'm an organizer, I'm a political person. This process and mothering in and of itself, it stretches and challenges my values every day. It challenges my politics. It challenges what I thought versus what the reality is around family building and family separation. So you got to prepare to be challenged and to have your little value system buttons pushed. Going, is this really what you feel? Is this really how you want to approach that? Or is there nuance? Because there's a lot of nuance. So I'll stop there if there's another follow-up question.
Yeah, it's kind of that daily reckoning. I wondered if we could shift gears just a little bit, and I'm sort of combining, already building on one of the questions that we have for the audience and reminding people to drop your questions in that Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom. But I know we definitely have disabled people among us, maybe prospective adoptive parents, but maybe also social workers or people that work in the field. And what do you wish that social workers and those that kind of are part of that certification process, and Yomi, you started touching on this in terms of their ableist views and just the strange like value that they place on things like chasing children through parks, as if like that is a critical task of parenting is going to a wide open park and seeing what happens. I've never understood that either. But and I'm also a wheelchair user, and so adapt and have adapted my whole life, whether it be when the kids were infants or when they're teens, which you brought up brings about different challenges. And so Yomi, let's start with you with this one in terms of what do you wish social workers, and we don't have to keep it to just social workers. Maybe there were judges, maybe there were other people that are kind of built into the system. What do you wish they knew about disabled parents?
The judges that I encountered were wonderful, so I didn't have issues there. But the entire all the constellation of social workers, lawyers, because pre-adopted children, like foster children, they have their own attorney. The state has their attorney. Then you have social workers. My daughter was not born in the county that I live, so I had social workers in the county that she was born, and then the social workers that were the agency that licensed me. So I will just say, as a disabled person who has a very significant visual disability, same as yours, Kara, we have a lot, and we are wheelchair users. I don't know what, for you and Robin, what your childhood or upbringing was like, but I used to be on public benefits. I had social workers in my business a lot. I was in the trap of SSI and having and Medi-Cal and all of that. And once I became an adult and started and established my own life and my own professional career and bought a home, like I grind so much so that I don't ever have to be under the state gaze. But when you adopt or when you foster, you suddenly have the state back in your life and back in your business in a way that for me was very psychologically triggering. And because I thought all that was behind me. So I got licensed, right? And then boom, they called me and asked to take a baby. So I guess it's okay now to place a baby with me. But the first time that the social worker did like the initial visit, they have to visit within like 24 hours of a placement. The social worker had more questions about how I take care of myself. Do I live alone? Do I have a caregiver? Do I cook for myself? Can I feed myself? Than how I was going to take care of this baby. So you're going to deal with that. Just know as a person who is disabled, whether it is a parent or non-apparent disability, if you disclose a non-apparent disability, you will immediately be hit with bias and assumption and ableism. And you have to know how to navigate that. And sometimes you got to be slicker than them. You know, sometimes you have to be able to choose your battles, because if your end goal is to build your family and get to a point where you and this child are a family legally, and you don't have to have the state in your business anymore, I would say you have to be really clear about what you're going to fight for and what you're just going to let go. Where to advocate, where to push, and where to back off. Because not everything can be a fight, because it's also emotionally draining.
Yeah.
I had to go back to therapy, parenting my child, because of the sudden, not just the sudden intrusion of the social services community in my life and the oppression that I was suddenly feeling and dealing with again, but also that I had to reorient myself to being in care, what collective care looks like. I'm a disability justice organizer and educator. We talk a lot about principles of disability justice, about collective care. And what I found is that that was good for everybody else. But I was not comfortable needing the level of care and support that I've come to need as a parent. And I needed to get comfortable with that. I needed to be really clear about what it looks like to build a village, how to sustain that village, how to set boundaries, and how to let people in to help. Because there is no way that I could successfully parent this child and love myself. Sorry, I'm at a coffee shop. I know people here. And love myself and care for myself without support. And so there was a lot of stuff that I had to learn and unlearn.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. It's so difficult to unlearn that kind of focus on independence we have and really embrace that interdependence. Robin, before we go to audience questions, what do you wish that social workers and people involved in the kind of system at large knew about disabled parents and adoptive disabled parents?
I wish one of the things that I encountered, the big ableism thing I encountered was I have a mental illness. And with the mental illness, I had to have that almost got me what quote unquote disqualified from even getting licensed. I had to get basically all of these letters from my doctors saying that um, my my mental illness basically was in remission, that, and so therefore that that made it then, and it was okay, and like I wasn't gonna snap or something. I don't know, but it was just one of that was the biggest pushback. And also, like, because my husband had also had depression, and had gone through rehab for alcohol addiction, and I was like, wow, um, they did a lot more pushback and things like that. I was like, in a way that people aren't with people who are not adopting, people who, have kids or whatever. So um but also having to navigate and deal with social workers. Fortunately, in my case, I feel like because I had a husband, and my husband is a white appearing able-bodied male, and I what he didn't I don't feel like he got the kind of grilling and things like that the way that I did, but it was, when I was listening to Yomi and all the things that she was bringing up about, that whole trauma about having the state all in your business. Um, and I, I, that part, that part took some getting used to, because I had social workers in another state. I had the social workers here in California, and then I had like another outside agency's social worker as well, and I just got so burnt out of dealing with the bureaucracy of all of these different states, and also the rulings around, like, where I could even take my kid, where we could, like every time we were going to go travel or get on a plane, I had to let his social workers in another state know that, hey. And that was that kind of got a bit interesting, because they were like, wow, you sure try. And also because they know your finances, they know everything about you, and that's just kind of that just kind of felt, that was a lot to deal with. But also, you know, I felt like they didn't really, they, where I encountered where they were like, oh wow, okay, yeah, you're disabled. Like, it was kind of no, because I use a walker, and so, I have the also physical disability that's apparent, and that was kind of they kind of looked at that. But where was I going with this? Sorry. But no, anyway, there were some that, I'll just put it this way, it was really, really great. We all of us were like, wow, once the adoption was final and did not have a state, because it got to a point with all of the bureaucracy of trying to get the kid here, once I had met him, and dealing with social workers who, especially, they had this one particular social worker who was on some kind of power trip, who even told me, well, this kid is not going anywhere unless I say it's okay for them. And, you know, and also the other fact that I was constantly getting new social workers. We'd have a social worker, I'd be working with them for a few months, and then bam, then we have another social worker that comes into there. But
Yeah, over and
you
over
know,
again. Yomi, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add one more thing that you should not be prepared for is the way your body, the toll on your body of parenting as a disabled person. And that's not to say you can't do it or whatever. We're all doing it. The three of us are doing it. But it would be a lie if I said I wasn't exhausted, that there hasn't been a physical toll on my body. I became a parent at the age of 50. So welcome to menopausal motherhood. Like all of the ways that my body has been impacted just through the aging process, and my body and my disability changing as I age, and the needs of this child. So you have to be real clear about that. And when I say real clear, I don't mean that it's a make or break. I'm saying you build in some support and tools to manage that.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you. We've gotten some great questions. A lot of the questions really ask for us to share resources. And so I know that we're going to be gathering those just so we don't have to rely on what we think of right now. We'll gather those and share those as a follow-up resource after this webinar. So, and I know I'm happy to contribute to that as well as you all. So thank you for those requests of resources. I wondered if we could kind of maybe wrap up. We'll see how we do with this on this last question, which is, how has becoming a parent changed your life? And I know, Robin, you were already a parent, but so you can answer that how you choose, either becoming a parent or becoming an adoptive parent. Let's see, we started with Yomi first last time. So Robin, how has becoming a parent changed your life?
For me, becoming a parent to me was the best decision of my life. I can't imagine life not being a mom. I've always, like I said, wanted to be a mom, and it's now that I feel extraordinarily fortunate that I get to be the mom of these two people, and that I get to that, and that I feel privileged to be able to have a family. Um, and you asked, oh crap, because I wanted to say, and it was really important. But
How's it
anyway,
changed your life?
yeah,
Is
how
that-
it changed my life. Yes. Especially going from one to two, it really changed my life as an outlook, and also like it changed also my idea of what is family, what does it mean to be family, and um, how do you create, and what does it mean to create and co-create family together, and um, also like I feel like it's also taught me a lot about being intentional about life and how we go about. And it is also it's given it's it's given my life meaning in a way that I I like I love the sense of belonging that being in a family is.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yomi, how's it changed your life?
I would say that this is the most blissed out and exhausted I've ever been in my life. Excuse me. She literally coughed down my throat last week, which is why I'm sick. So, when you get these kids, especially when they're little, they're like, we used to kid that we used to joke in our family, like joke, not joke, that my baby was typhoid Mary, because like the minute they go to daycare, they bring every virus and illness home to you. And then everybody gets sick. So it's like the most sick I've ever been, like chronically sick, with cold, flu, RSV, COVID. And it's wonderful. It's beautiful. I feel like this child is, so my favorite author is Zora Neale Hurston. And there's a longer quote, but she wrote in one of her books, Their Eyes Are Watching God, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. And my daughter is the answer. And it's just been an amazing experience. I look forward to helping her grow up and seeing who she becomes. It's truly, truly wonderful and truly hard. It's like the hardest, and there are parts of it that super suck. I'm not gonna lie. Some of it sucks. Like, she was not nice to me yesterday. She's mean sometimes, but
Yeah, I think I can attest, I'm sure you can too, Robin, with teenagers, that will continue, unfortunately. Look a little bit different as they get older. Thank you all so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm going to pass it to Nicole to wrap us up, but I hope you all are also enjoying these beautiful photos on the screen. And what would be the best way? I can describe mine, and then maybe we can pass it to each other for a quick description. So my photo
That's
is
the
on.
best way to wrap up.
Okay, my photo is on the far right. It has me, oh my gosh, the second one over. I don't want to try directions here. My youngest this was from a couple years ago. She is now 8. My son is in the middle. We adopted him from China at age 7. He is now 18. And then we have my husband, Adam. He's also a wheelchair user. And then my daughter, Hannah, is now 15. And then Robin, it looks like you all are in the middle. Will you describe your picture?
Yes. Hi. Okay. So we've got, from what I'm looking at, my left is my oldest, now 21, by their kind of they're biracial, black, white person with glasses and hair, and they're wearing a shirt that has biological on it crossed out, adoptive crossed out, foster crossed out, and it says brother. And then my son that has biological, adoptive, foster crossed out, and it says son. And then I have the same shirt, but it says mom. And my husband next to me has the same shirt, and it says dad on it. And we're standing in a kitchen smiling. And that was the day that Xavier was adopted.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yomi, how about your pictures?
sure. So this is a collage of our family day. So the bottom left is like 90 seconds after we met each other, and she was handed to me. She's 14 days old. And so every year on the same day, we take the same photo in front of our morning glories. So then at the top right, she's 1 year old there. And then to the left of that, she's 2. And then bottom right, we just took this in August, and she's 3.
Oh my God.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate this opportunity to talk to both of you all, and this has just been great. Nicole, do you have anything to close us out with?
Yeah. Thank you so much to our panelists. This was the most fantastic webinar. My email address is at the bottom of this slide. You are welcome to email me, and if our panelists are comfortable, if you want to get in touch with our panelists and they're comfortable with that, I will be happy to share their contact information. And we will be sending out a resource document answering as many of the questions as possible that we didn't get to, along with some resources. So on behalf of all of us at Lurie, thank you so much for attending.